If you're in hardware procurement, especially for big deployments, every single component choice you make really, really matters. Today, we're going to dig into one that seems simple on the surface, but can have huge consequences down the line: picking the right SSD. So let's start with a question I get asked all the time. It usually sounds something like this. And you know what? It's a perfectly fair question. When you're looking at a bill of materials for hundreds, maybe thousands of units, that lower per unit cost on a consumer drive looks really tempting. But the real question is it actually the smart business decision? Well, the answer isn't a simple yes or no. To really get this right, we've got to reframe how we look at the problem. We need to move beyond just the sticker price and start thinking about the long-term total cost of ownership. And that distinction you see here, it's absolutely crucial. The upfront purchase price, that's just a single line item. It's easy to see, easy to compare. But the total cost of ownership, or TCO, that tells the whole story. Especially for unattended systems like kiosks that have to run reliably for years, TCO is the number that's going to make or break your bottom line. Okay, so enough with the theory. Let's look at how this actually plays out in the real world, in a real sourcing decision. This isn't just a hypothetical. This is a real company that had to make this exact choice. So here we have a project involving a 600-unit kiosk deployment over in Malaysia. They needed a 1 terabyte system drive, and they were staring right at that choice we're talking about. Go with the cheaper consumer SSD or invest in a more robust industrial one. And here's the kicker. They specifically decided not to take the cheaper option. So why? Well, their decision really boiled down to these 3 things. They were all focused on long-term value and stability. First, making sure the component actually fit the application. Second, getting consistency across their entire fleet. And third, and this one is huge, lowering the risk of incredibly expensive field maintenance. And this really gets to the heart of it. These reasons, they're not just about tech specs on a datasheet. They're about managing the hidden costs and the operational risks that are just baked into any large unattended deployment. First up, let's talk about consistency. You see, with consumer-grade drives, manufacturers can and often do change the internal components from batch to batch to hit a certain price. Now, for your personal PC, you might never notice, but for a fleet of 600 kiosks, that's a support nightmare waiting to happen. You can end up with performance and reliability that's all over the place, and it becomes impossible to manage. And that brings us to the giant elephant in the room for any unattended system: field maintenance. Let's be crystal clear about this. When a kiosk in a mall or an airport goes down, the cost of the failed SSD is, well, it's practically nothing. The real cost is everything that happens next. Think about this chain reaction, this domino effect. First, the system is down. That's lost revenue right away. Then you have to dispatch a technician, the classic truck roll, which costs you money in labor, time, and travel. And while all this is happening, your customers are seeing an out-of-order sign, which just chips away at your brand's reputation for being reliable. And this entire expensive mess, it can all be triggered by one cheap component failing. So this is what we mean by application fit. It's about using the right tool for the job. A consumer drive is built for a pretty cushy life in a desktop computer, running maybe 8 hours a day. A kiosk, on the other hand, could be running 24/7 in a place with fluctuating temperatures. An industrial SSD is engineered and tested for exactly that kind of demanding, always-on environment. It's just built for a different purpose. All right, so when you pull all of this together, the need for consistency, the true painful cost of a field failure, and getting the right application fit, you end up at the one crucial insight that every strategic hardware buyer needs to understand. I want you to let that one sink in for a second. The cheapest component is not always the lowest cost decision. Saving a few dollars on the initial bill of materials can easily come back to bite you, costing hundreds or even thousands more in maintenance and downtime over the life of that system. The truly lowest cost decision is the one that gives you reliability and minimizes your risk over the long haul. Now that is strategic procurement.